we're just right here. Yeah.
There you go. Perfect.
Yeah, so.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Susan and Jack, for inviting me and for that incredibly kind introduction. So, well, welcome again. And, you know, when I give a presentation, I always like to get a feeling and kind of a quick understanding of the people in the room. And I did ask Susan to give me an idea about your interests and who you are. I know a few people here. Shannon is actually one of our students at American College. So here's the title of my talk, and I added "and more" because I have some interesting things at the end I think that will be of interest to you. So what we're going to cover today, we're actually going to look at what aromatherapy is, because a lot of time I'm asked, really, what is aromatherapy? What is essential oil therapy? And how does it work? That is also of interest to a lot of people. I want to share with you the top 9 essential oils used by a group that I call the American Professional Aromatherapists. So I want to share with you these top 9 essential oils. The APAs, the American Professional Aromatherapists, are members of groups such as NAHA, AIA, they're registered aromatherapists through ARC. So it was a fairly significant group. I have surveyed this group now for 3 years running, and I have gathered this data. I'm also going to share with you the top 20 retail oils and the market drivers for the retail market. The data there, I have commissioned a market research company called Spins, and they have provided the data to me over the last 3 years. So I have some comparative analysis as well. We're going to talk a little bit about the European market. Susan kindly mentioned to you that I was in Italy. I was actually down in Sicily meeting with our certified organic lemon oil producer, and also at a conference in Rome called IFIAT, which was very interesting. So I was actually studying a lot of the European market and essential oil production there. We're going to look at these 3 different lavenders. We're going to concentrate on the biological activity of angustifolia. We're going to take a look at labeling and some deceptive marketing practices that are occurring here in the United States. We're also going to touch on the FDA warning letters. Anybody not know about those? We're going to talk about those. And we're also going to look at the European legislation and talk a little bit about, I'm going to get out my crystal ball and say, will it affect US lavender growers? Of course, we don't really know the answer to that, but let's get as informed as we can. So what is aromatherapy? And I always like to look at cartoons. You know, here, I think I'm in love with him, but it might be my aromatherapy. We can see here that aromatherapy is making an impact whether we like it or not. The other term you'll see out there is essential oil therapy. And it really is a more correct term, because we're going to really look at, you might see aromatherapy, aromatology, aromacology. These are all terms out there. I'm not going to read all this. You can read it when you get a copy of the PowerPoint. But the thing about aromatherapy is it is just inhalation, baths, compresses, topical application, such as a body massage. Aromatology is more of internal use, and aromacology is only those oils that have been shown by research to have an impact on mood, physiology, and behavior. So, I mean, it's a little bit semantic, but I thought you might be interested to see those different terms. But really, how does it work? And do you need to be able to smell? Now, of course, sometimes it's good not to be able to smell. When you meet the skunk on the road, right? You might want to think, yes, well, is that aromatherapy? But the fact is, you don't need to be able to smell. Fancy that. Because some people have something called anosmia, and anosmics also can benefit from smell, and there is research to show this. The olfactory system is an incredible system and incredibly powerful in the body. But how does it work, and how do we know it works? there's quite a lot of research out there to show us how it works. The intriguing thing about essential oil therapy or aromatherapy is it works both psychologically and physiologically simultaneously. Now, when you think about it, there's not too many things do that. What occurs when you inhale lavender essential oil, because that is what we're going to focus on, but really it's any essential oil, it ends up in your bloodstream pretty quickly. Inhalation is actually the fastest route to your bloodstream, which is quite significant when you think about it. You do not need to take it orally. There's all these things that can help us understand it's working. Brainwaves, particularly interesting. What lavender has been shown to be able to do is take your brainwaves from a beta state, beta where you're anxious, you know, you're in traffic, you've got to get somewhere, you're alert, down to an alpha state, which is more where we are when we're meditating, doing yoga, relaxed, inhaling lavender. But the wonderful thing about lavender is you don't lose that focus and ability to be alert and to concentrate. They've actually shown that your brain can be in an alpha state with lavender, and you can be really very effective doing complicated tasks, 5th grade math, you name it, you can do it. I say that only because I've been trying to help my granddaughter do her math. So let's look at some of the health claims. I mentioned some of it. So we know it improves memory and increases alertness. It affects mood. It affects overall performance ability, cognitive performance, and attention speed. So, you know, who needs pharmacological drugs when we have essential oils? But seriously, exactly. I mean, one person's wonderful essential oil is another person's kind of, you know, dog butt candle, right? I mean, because how many of you think, well, somebody's saying to you, that worked for me, but you're going, well, it didn't really work for me. I mean, how many times have you experienced that? So what is that about? And then a lot of people say, well, it doesn't work. You know, it's all in your mind. You're going kind of crazy. So let's take a look at what research shows us. Prior experiences and expectations affect the final outcome. So what do I mean by that? If you originally had a bad experience with lavender, maybe when you were a small child, you went to stay with your grandma, and your grandma had lavender in her drawer, right? Little lavender sachets in her drawers that had all her beautiful lace or breakable things in there, and you wanted to kind of have a look through them, and your grandma said, no, 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 you're not allowed in there. And so one day you go in there and you sneak a peek, and she walks in the room and growls at you. Believe it or not, what occurred when you initially smelled that lavender is going to stay with you in your limbic system and potentially be brought to the surface every time you smell lavender. You may not remember that absolute episode, but your physiological reaction the same kind of reaction will occur. Culture and learned social behavior. You'll be surprised how in different cultures, different aromas have a completely different impact and understanding. There is some evidence of gender-related differences. So when Dominic here smells lavender, or when Jim smells lavender, it might be completely different than when Amy or Shannon smell lavender. So there are gender differences. Little age-related differences, which is interesting, but much evidence to suggest individual variance. Well done. Wouldn't life be easier if we were all the same and we all reacted to lavender in the same way? Then we'd just know what the outcome was going to be. But that's the skill of an aromatherapist. So let's take a look at how it actually, how all those things occur in the body. And this researcher Jelinek, way back in '97, really did a lot of work on this, and I still quote him because I think his work is extremely valid and important. So he talked about 4 methods of aroma action. The first one is quasi-pharmacological. Now that's a big word that just basically means it has a physiological action in your body, but the quasi is referring to it's such a minute dose that it's somewhat like a pharmacological prescription drug, you might say, but the dosage is extremely tiny. Semantic. Semantic is referring to the story I was telling you about Grandma's drawers. Basically, semantic means it's a bit like aroma conditioning. If you have a negative or a positive experience when you first were introduced to a fragrance or an essential oil, that tends to be your conditioning that will surround that aroma going forward. So it's important to keep that in mind. Hedonic valence. This just basically means when you smell an oil, do you have a sense of liking it or disliking it? That's going to have a significant impact for you as an individual. Now, olfaction is very subjective. Do not feel just because your neighbour likes something, you have to like it. Placebo. Now, I love placebo. Now, a lot of people say, oh, but it's just placebo. Meaning like, well, does that make it bad? I actually think placebo is phenomenal because the power of placebo ensures that something is going to really work. And our brain is one of the most powerful, I believe is the most powerful organ in the body. And this is what placebo can do for us. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. Basically, that means when the aromatherapist gives you an essential oil, they're going to tell you, here's some beautiful certified organic lavandula angustifolia, and it's going to make your brain go into an alpha state. You're going to feel really super relaxed. Even if it doesn't work, you know, which I know it does, but if some people think it doesn't work, that suggestiveness is the beginning of the placebo effect. So that was a very quick look at essential oils and why they work and how they work. But I hope that gives you some idea of the complexity and also the potential of essential oils. They have enormous potential. So let's take a look at some data here. I've said here that lavender is actually the top essential oil in the United States in the retail sector. If you take a look here, these are, I'm sure, sorry this is such small print, but when you get your copy of this, you'll be able to take a good look at it. But basically, over the last 52 weeks, it was 23.1% of all essential oil sales in the United States. Interesting here too, I thought you might be interested to know that peppermint also had significant growth, and it actually grew by 38.4% in the last year, which I thought was interesting. So if any of you are in an area that grows nice peppermint, that might be a crop that you might want to consider. And there I've given you some information also on some other oils. I then took a look at the top 9 oils used by this group I was telling you about, the American Professional Aromatherapists. And why there's only 9 is that after 9 the data was really insignificant. There was many oils used by, you know, just a few people here and there. So, but I ranked it against the previous chart just to show you what professional aromatherapists are using and how the retail market kind of works with that. So you see the retail market and aromatherapists, lavender is really top again. So it really is a significant oil in the market. Interesting here too that bergamot is number 2 for professional aromatherapists. And if you take a look at the constituents of bergamot oil, it's very similar to lavender. Of course, it smells completely different, but the constituent profile is very similar. So I wanted to share with you some market drivers. What is affecting the retail market? And one of the things I was able to find out was in prior years, organic was really important, certified organic. But in the last survey I did, which was just at the beginning of this year, GMO really came up as being extremely significant. People want to absolutely know that their aromatic materials are non-GMO. Now you might think, well, that's a bit ridiculous. I mean, who's going to produce a GMO altered lavender oil? You'll be surprised actually. A lot of the new research coming out is talking about cultured fragrance and cultured flavors. Now they're not GMO in the sense that there's no DNA alteration, but they are using DNA to extract the enzyme activity in order to turn a fragrance on or off within a material. So, and basically they're cultured at a lab. I'm not saying that they don't have a place in flavour and fragrance, they might, but I'm a big believer in transparency, and if something is going to be cultured or if something is GMO, then I want to read it on my label. That's all I'm saying. Environmental stewardship is really important to retail users and also to professional aromatherapists. They're really concerned about what's happened in the environment when this essential oil was produced. Now, I started studying essential oils way back in the 70s when pretty much there was an extremely limited supply and certainly no certified organic material out there. I've travelled all over the world. I've seen women harvesting jasmine flowers from 3 o'clock in the morning onwards in India, and so dedicated to their task. They have their babies strapped to their back. They don't even look up from the job. They don't stop for water or anything because basically they're paid on weight. And I went out and tried to help them. Well, of course, I just got in their way, and now I feel bad that I probably annoyed the heck out of them. But it's not an easy job. It sounds easy, harvesting jasmine flowers quickly. It really isn't. You get leaves in there, your product is rejected, and of course you lose money. And their pay was something like the equivalent of $5 US a month. So it's, you know, and when you think that jasmine essential oil sells for something like 5,000 a kilo wholesale, you can see that environmental and, you know, fair trade is not really big on the list there. I've also seen the other thing that I really want to share with you why I believe certified organic is important, not just for the environmental impact, the big picture, the fact that, you know, we don't want pesticides in our bodies, but also the workers and the women who are involved with harvesting are frequently exposed to a lot of the chemicals. I've been in Turkey at commercial rose production farms, and there I've seen a similar picture, women out early harvesting, canisters of spent pesticides and herbicides lying in the farm, and a number of the women sharing with me the variety of ill health issues they were dealing with, cancer being the primary one, and more importantly, not even knowing that the rose petals they were harvesting were going down the road to the state-owned distillery to be made into rose oil. They'd never even smelled rose oil. They didn't have a clue what it was being used for. So there's lots of issues within the industry that it's important to be aware of, and it's great that we're using it for health on our end, health and wellness, but if it's not resulting in health and wellness for the producer and the environment, it's not in my opinion, holistic. Research on biological potential is also important to a lot of people, and you'll notice that something like cinnamon, you probably all in the last couple of years read popular articles about how cinnamon is great for diabetes and metabolic syndrome, And there was a lot of popular articles out there about that based on research, and that really drove the market. Cinnamon became a hot commodity, and cinnamon essential oil. Method of production, primarily steam distillation is the desired production method for an aromatherapy oil. You will have some oils that are called absolutes, because some flowers, some leaves, some stems, some roots do not give up their fragrant molecules, their aromatic molecules, to steam. They just will not. Lilac, for example. If you see a lilac essential oil, it's not a steam distilled oil. It probably isn't even an absolute. It might be an effleurage where they soak the petals in fat and skim that off and then volatilize off the material. But generally absolutes, because it is said that there is some of the solvent that's used to extract the material is still in the material, they are generally not preferred by an aromatherapist. However, I do still use them. They have value. So I basically said to you organic and non-GMO have increased significantly, and I just think that's because there's more awareness about the issues with that. I just wanted to share with this with you quickly. It just is showing you the increase over the last 12 months of organic performance in the essential oil sector. It's really grown significantly. Essential oils grew by about a rate of 22.5. Organic essential oils grew 34.6. So if anyone's wondering whether to get into the organic market, it definitely is worth it. But I know, that comes with its own set of headaches. World production, I wanted to share this with you just to give you an idea of what's happening out there in the world with lavender oil. And when I talk lavender here, I'm talking angustifolia. Here are the main producing areas right now: France, Bulgaria. There's a little bit coming out of Ukraine and Moldova. I actually had to look up where that country is. This has given you an idea, and I'm sorry this is quite small, but when you get it, you can really have a good look at it. What I think is significant here is to see the drop in production from 2005 to 2006. I believe that had something to do with disease and a variety of other issues, market issues. But look how the price has remained relatively stable, and production is really not too bad now at about 142. But I mean the average, right, the total here. But, right now they're saying that the current price covers, in Europe, they're saying the current price covers production. But if price drops below this, pretty much global production will stop as well, or drop, because, of course, people are not going to be growing what they're not able to make a living out of. So let's take a look at some varieties. Now, this is probably where you are a lot more knowledgeable than I am if you're growers, and I'm sure you grow some interesting lavenders, but I'm just going to talk to you about, as an aromatherapist, as an essential oil therapist, what we primarily use. So here we're looking at what we call true lavender, and it's the angustifolia. You've also seen it probably as officinalis or vera. The lavender hybrid, which is the mix of angustifolia and latifolia, which gives you intermedia, and then the Spanish lavender, which is stoicus. So just a little bit about lavender. Of course, it's been used for thousands of years. I love this story that it comes from the Latin lavere, to wash. I learned Latin for 5 years at high school. I never really could understand why I was learning Latin, but now I'm really glad I did. And it's a great language when you're studying plants. The Romans used lavender to strew on the floor. Imagine that, entering a room where lavender was just all over the floor. I think that's fabulous. I want to live in that house. And a bathing herb. Four Thieves vinegar, which everybody heard of Four Thieves vinegar? You can get the recipe on the internet. Apparently it was really quite incredible for supposedly combating the plague, and it's a very popular remedy. In those days also, in medieval Europe, frequently this is my theory, they talked a lot about evil spirits, so they used lavender under their pillows to ward off evil spirits. You even now see basil still growing in big pots in Europe, in Greece, in Spain, and when you ask, it's always at the door or on the windowsill. When you ask the person of the house why, they will tell you to stop the evil spirits. And a lot of these plants are actually antibacterial and antiseptic. So I think the evil spirits are really bacteria that can make you sick. But you know, we still like to put it under our pillow. Glovers in Grasse, which of course is the capital of perfumery in France, used to scent leather gloves with lavender, and it was said to ward off the plague. Interesting, isn't it, how scented gloves are just no longer in vogue, but I always think that would be a great product. I would love a scented glove, you know, oh, excuse me, I have to smell my glove, you know. I mean, but now, of course, research shows that it does repel ticks and fleas, and of course fleas were what, you know, transmitted plague. And really there was extensive medical use in Britain up until about the 18th century, when there was really the dominance of the medical industry and the pharmaceutical industry started to evolve. The lavender varieties, I just put this in here for you. This is European information, so you may or may not be familiar with these. This one here, and this is information I just received from the conference in Italy. This one here, I was told, is increasing in popularity. And these clonal lavenders are, and I know Mayette is here, but I'm not sure about these, but you know, you growers in the room are the experts, so you'll know more about that. The one that, as an aromatherapist, that we really love, we love the wild lavender, the lavender that grows at, you know, up to 1,100 meters. I translated it because I think in meters, but there it is, about 3,500 feet, high in the mountains in France. And what's interesting about this lavender is the higher altitude a lavender is growing, the more lineal acetate it will have. Lineal acetate is an ester and it's anti-inflammatory, and it's what gives the essential oil that incredible uplifting fragrance. And Amy is going to hand out the lineal acetate, and I want you to try and smell both of your, the Stoicus and the Angustifolia, and see if you can get a hint of the lineal acetate and see which one has more. So the minute you know that an oil has an ester content, a lineal acetate content, you're going to know that that essential oil is an anti-inflammatory and a sedative. Let's talk about lavandin. You probably all know the story about lavandin. So a French distiller told me this story. It was kind of cute. He said, well, you know, originally lavender angustifolia grew, you know, way up in the hills, and lavandin grew, you know, further down and lesser altitudes. But the two got together and had babies, and they produced wild lavandin. And then, of course, when people started harvesting that, they saw that it gave a much larger volume of essential oil. The yield was more. Because the thing with angustifolia from the high altitude is the yield is quite low. And, you know, it's, of course, hard work harvesting that lavender, right? I think it would be extremely arduous. So here we're talking about intermedia. So that is latifolia, and angustifolia gives intermedia. So that's their baby. And the varieties that, again, this is European information, is the Grosso, the Super, the Abrial, and the Sumian. And we have the first three here for you today, the Grosso, the Super, and the Abrial. Now, let's take a look at the different clones. Now, this slide might look a little bit scary, but basically here, what I've shown you is the major compounds in lavender. I talked to you about linyl acetate, but you see here, they're really there's quite a lot of variety here. Now, the Super, the Grosso, gives the highest yield as an essential oil. So when you distill lavender, if it's Grosso, you're going to get the highest yield. But let's take a look at it. The one that is closest to Lavandula angustifolia is actually this Super, because look at the level of linyl acetate here. And the one constituent that sets, well, there's actually two things that set Lavandula angustifolia apart from lavender. It's the linyl acetate quantity and the lack of camphor and borneol and the very small amount of cineol. Now you might wonder, why is that important? So when you think about lavender, what is the main thing you think it's going to do? Calm you, exactly. Balance you, right, exactly. So this is a calming constituent. This is going to do that. However, these three constituents are stimulating. So if you want to achieve calming, balancing, sedating, improve sleep quality, less anxiety, are you going to use an essential oil that contains stimulating active constituents? Probably not. But does that mean it doesn't have value? It does have value. Lavender has value. I think it's had a bad rap because people have used it thinking lavender's lavender. But it's really important to understand what kind of lavender you're working with. Here is our Stoicus. You probably all recognize that, the rabbit ears. That's the thing that sets it apart. Also known as Spanish lavender. Not widely used in aromatherapy. So why is Latin important? I talked to you a bit about learning Latin, and it's important to always buy your essential oils using the Latin. So now let's compare them. We've looked at lavender, which is your angustifolia. Here's your lavandin, and here's the Stoicus, also known as spike lavender. What I was telling you here was about linyl acetate, and here we can see lavender 22 to 35. Some lavandins can go up to 39. There's no question about it. Remember, I told you the clone that has the highest is the Super. So if you are going to use a lavandin where you want an anti-inflammatory but a stimulating, you would probably want to use a Super clone. But the thing about lavender as compared to these, I want you to notice, is really a very small amount of camphor. See, there's hardly any of this stimulating constituent. Whereas look at lavandin and look at spike lavender. So when you smell that Stoicus, see if you can smell that camphor. So linalool is another important constituent. And you'll see here the variances here. Now these numbers might not look like much, but they have incredible impact. The other thing is the 1,8-cineol. Now 1,8-cineol is actually a really important constituent. And when you see it in eucalyptus, it's called eucalyptol. And when you see it in cajeput, it's called cajeputol. Its primary action is antiseptic, antibacterial. So it's a very important constituent. So again, if you were looking for something more antiseptic, antibacterial, you might want to look at lavandin. But again, remember, it's a stimulant rather than a sedative. So let's take a look at some biological activity. I love this shot. Look, this is actually an enlarged photograph of the secretory trichome of a cell, a lavender oil cell within the lavender plant. Look at the colour of it, isn't that great? So I'm just going to quickly run through these, but lavender has some very significant research going on and some really impactful biological potential. Perineal discomfort, this was after birthing, primary pain for primary dysmenorrhea. It actually was shown to decrease the use of analgesics in tonsillectomy patients and post-surgery anxiety and nausea. More activity here, colic in infants, so you can use it very, very obviously tiny amounts. Anxiety, we've heard a lot about lavender and anxiety. Traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, the veterans have actually done quite a lot of research and work with aromatherapy and essential oils for post-traumatic stress disorder, and we have a number of veteran students at the college studying aromatherapy. And of course, insomnia and anxiety, particularly for dementia. Interesting too how it's very effective as an antimicrobial. And one of the things I'm really interested in is how lavender can work extremely well with other essential oils and actually other pharmaceutical drugs. There's some interesting research on synergy with not just essential oils but also with other pharmaceuticals, particularly antibiotics. But this one showed lavender, cinnamon and orange oil showed a very high synergy as an antimicrobial, and I actually gave you the ratio there. It's a 1:1 with lavender, and if you're interested in a natural antimicrobial, that's some good research to look up. Here we have the antibacterial and antifungal action with clary sage and lang lang, and very effective for both gram-positive and gram-negative, which is quite difficult in an essential oil. Basically, when an essential oil is affecting a bacteria, it has to penetrate the wall of the bacteria. Now, gram-negative are extremely difficult, but they have a very thin, very hard wall to penetrate. Now, it would be nice to think that essential oils were the answer to methicillin-resistant bacteria. Unfortunately, they're not. It has been shown that bacteria can also quickly change their mechanism, their cell wall mechanism, etc., and become the essential oil no longer becomes effective. So it's important to really mix it up, and it's important to try a lot of different things. And it's also why I like to use essential oils with antibiotic therapy. But of course you really have to do that carefully under the guidance of either a primary care physician who studied aromatherapy or a registered aromatherapist. I thought this was really interesting, the hypertension and prehypertension. Here they were able to show that cortisol concentration actually dropped, and it had not just an immediate effect, so within the first 10 minutes, but it was long-term as well. So I thought that was particularly interesting for blood pressure. Now, you may have seen this product on the market. You can Google it. You'll see it. We actually have it in our college store. It's a very interesting product. It's encapsulated lavender oil, and it's being sold for anxiety and sleep, improved sleep. They call it general anxiety disorder. Research shows it has a similar physiological effect on the body as lorazepam. Now, what's interesting, this is a German product, and you can't find a lot of information out there about it. They call it a select quality essential oil. So it makes me wonder, well, how is that different than our certified organic Lavender angustifolia, right? So I went and did quite a bit of research into this, and from what I could gather, and I do actually have the paper, and I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested, if you just make a note on the notebook that you'd like it. It has much higher lineal acetate in it. So whether that is, you know, added as an after effect, which can occur to both medicinal herbs and essential oils, someone will add either a naturally sourced lineal acetate, or i.e. taken from another plant or taken from the same plant and added to the oil, or whether it's synthetically sourced, I do not know, but it definitely is of interest. It's here on the market, and I use it. It seems like an interesting product. Let's move on to labelling. I don't want to run out of time till I get to the and more piece. I wanted to show you these old labels. I think they're kind of fun, but look, these are like 1930s, 2030s, 40 labels. Look, it's telling you 1 to 3 drops on sugar, 1 to 8 drops on sugar. And of course now it's all like, oh my goodness, don't take essential oils internally. You know, so interesting, isn't it, how things have changed. But let's talk about labelling. Basically, why I put this in, I know there's a lot of concern about the FDA warning letters that went out to 2 of the major multi-level marketing companies in the United States, doTERRA and Young Living, who unfortunately have a lot of, I'm not sure, sales representatives, I think is what the people are called, who have not been well educated in what you can or cannot say within the guidelines of DSHEA, which is the law that covers, the FDA has put essential oils into, dietary supplement labelling requirements for that. So basically, you can't make a disease claim anywhere, on a website, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, or face-to-face actually. Now you might wonder how the FDA finds these things. Apparently they found a lot of these claims on Pinterest. Everyone knows what Pinterest is, right? Anyone not? Anyone pin? I personally don't, but I know a lot of people do. But it seems like a big waste of time to me. You get into Pinterest and an hour's gone by before you know it. You've looked at a lot of pretty things though. And I mean, you know, people love it. It's great. It's probably it is a great way to share information. But I believe the way the FDA looks at things like this is they probably set up Google Alerts. You all know what Google Alerts are, right? If you're a marketer yourself, you've set them up yourself. So, I mean, it doesn't take too much to put 2 and 2 together. That's how they're patrolling the internet. And in a way, you know, you can understand that it's probably really important that you do not want somebody with Ebola buying tea tree oil thinking it's going to cure them and continuing to walk the streets with Ebola. But that is some of the claims that were out there, that this was going to cure Ebola, which is crazy. You might wonder, what is a disease claim? So let me just give you an example, and this is the tricky part. It is not easy. Let me just give you an example. You might think saying cinnamon is good for cholesterol. Who thinks that's a disease claim? Okay. Okay. It is actually a disease claim, and that seems kind of weird, but what it's saying is it's implying that cholesterol is high by saying something is good for. So what you have to say, you would say cinnamon is effective for supporting cholesterol that is already at a normal level, or something more eloquent. But you know, you have to be very clear that you're not saying it's going to reduce cholesterol in the body. And by just saying something's good for cholesterol, it implies cholesterol's high. So it really is quite tricky, so be careful. Just quickly, you can look at this when you get the slides. American Herbal Products Association, if you haven't gone to their website, it's worth it. They give a lot of good guidance on essential oil labelling. Unregulated terms, if you see all natural, spray-free, therapeutic grade, this is the one I love the most, certified pure therapeutic grade, registered, pure and natural, genuine medical grade. It's all BS. It's all marketing. I mean, it really, you can't rely on any of it. Yeah, some of it might be true, but you don't know that for sure. And it's a shame, it's unregulated, and it really means consumers can be led to believe that these things are somehow better. They're not. The only thing that's regulated is this, and so just be aware of that, and hopefully non-GMO soon. And so let's talk about European legislation. Now I know quite a few people are concerned about the new legislation in Europe that's requiring lavender to be labelled as an allergen. And not just lavender, but all the constituents within lavender that are considered allergens. So linalool, linyl acetate, these are considered allergens and they have to be labelled. Now this is too much information to go over in a short amount of time, but when you get it, here is the URL that is going to lead you to the paper, and I also have it if you'd like a copy of it, the actual final ruling of the European Union, which you can read for yourself. All of these organisations are worth connecting with. They're all trying to balance the situation in Europe without much success, I might add. And basically what we have right now is about 26 allergens listed. All of them will impact essential oils. All of these constituents are considered to be allergens. So if you have an essential oil in a product that contains any of these essential oils, you will need to label it as such. If you're selling into Europe, this is not the regulation here in the United States. And if you have a product, if it's a leave-on skin cosmetic, i.e. a body cream, you can only have it in 10 parts per million. If it's a wash-off or a household product, 100 parts per million. So you have to be quite careful. This is kind of a scary looking slide, but I wanted to just show you up here, linalool and limonene. This is use in cosmetic products in Europe. You can see here how often these two appear in body creams, etc., etc. So just be aware of that. European Commission, again, I've given you that URL there. So right now there's about 28 essential oils on their list. It's going to impact. I've given you all the contact allergens here, and when you look at this list, you'll see these crosses here. Here's the guide to that. So basically, if I'm going to actually show you lavender, it's here, and so they're saying that there's up to about 100 cases that have shown to be where it has acted as an allergen. So there I've just given you some more information there about what you can and cannot do if you're selling into Europe. Is it going to affect growers? Well, I thought about this quite a bit, plus I also asked some of my colleagues in Europe, because I know lavender growers there are not at all happy, but what they are saying is most likely not. Because for it to impact the industry, it would mean that producers are going to have to stop using lavender oil in products. And I'm a great believer in the force of the consumer. I mean, consumers love lavender. There's an increase in all things natural. People are not going to want to go to a synthetic type of lavender. I do not believe, but that is purely my own opinion. And I don't think this legislation is going to go away. So I think it would behoove everybody who sells into Europe or who's thinking about selling into Europe to get a copy of the legislation, take a good read of it, just to see what you can and cannot do. So I'm sorry I didn't leave much time for questions. But you have my email address, and you're welcome to shoot me an email. You're welcome to come by our booth and talk to Amy or Dominic. I'll be here a little bit longer and then again tomorrow, but I have some things I have to do this afternoon. Thanks for your attention. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.